So this is my third Code Geass R2 script I'm starting before finishing one of them. There's a lot to unpack here, to say the least. Every time it felt like I was getting somewhere with a script, it would branch off into more things I felt needed addressed solo, so here we are at what really caught my eye from R2, aside from the ending, Lelouch's confrontation with his father, Emperor Charles. We'd seen glimpses of this area before, the platform that holds the Sword of Akasha, but only ever got fleeting hints at what it may be, or overdramatic drops of the name Ragnarok connection, and never much more. That is, until R2 episode 20 and 21, where Lelouch traps them both inside of this space in a final attempt to take down his immortal father. This becomes an info dump of a scene. Entertaining for sure, but it introduces a lot of ideas that don't have much time to simmer for as deep as they are. I was confused myself until the final scene where Lelouch's real plan comes to light for us. This, to me, backed up his rhetoric from episode 21 about deceit, or more accurately, lying, being an important element to humanity. Knowing that Charles's pact among himself, Marianne, C2, and B2 was to create a world where lies no longer existed is a bit harsh for Lelouch. Understandably, his entire plan revolved around lies and deceit on almost all fronts. Lying to people as both himself and Zero, to his friends and foes alike, lying has been a sort of way forward for Lelouch the whole time. So it makes sense that he would want to stop this from happening for his sake, especially knowing that his end goal involved dying with a lie, that he was a power-mad tyrannical emperor to draw the ire of the world onto himself. He lied to them all to craft a symbol of oppression and hate for them to tear down and unite against. In his new world, deception was necessary for humanity to move forward, so I figured this was behind his reasoning on why people lie, saying,
"It isn't only because they struggle against each other. It's also because there's something that they're seeking."
It makes sense from his perspective, and in general. When people want something, often an easier path is from lying. It's easier to make false promises than be entirely truthful to reach a public office. It's easier to lie to a partner and cheat on them than to give up what you have for something else. But this is an idea I'll save the rest of for another time, because I want to address more about Charles's idea here. Now, the core of his pact is to create a world without lies, but the way he went about this seemed a bit off to me, and likely to other people as well. They use a few terms for his end goal, most notably killing God and the collective unconscious. And this becomes extrapolated into a stoppage of time, with Lelouch himself asking gods to keep the flow of time moving forward. I figured these were all just a bit of flowery decoration around Charles and Code's endgame, and with Lelouch's motivations presented at the end, that made sense to me. But I wanted to dig deeper into it because I couldn't believe that such an amazing anime would just leave scattered material on the table, hardly touched like that. And this led me to some research on Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, one of the direct lines from the anime and a major influence over Charles's motivations. Jung was a close friend of a much more well-known name, Sigmund Freud. In the early years of the 20th century, they stuck together due to their similar interests within psychoanalytic practice. Specifically, they each had a fascination with the unconscious mind, the idea of something that we can't perceive that is a part of us and holds an influence over ourselves. Disagreements on this specifically, however, gave them splitting psychoanalytical theories and created a rift between the two, leading Jung to go off and create his own theories separate from Freud. Where his former friend viewed part of the unconscious as sort of a well of repressed desire specific to the individual, Jung viewed it as a part of something he would dub the collective unconscious. This is the idea that there is a hidden second level of consciousness that exists within humanity as something non-individual and more inherited. Through evolution, a sort of ancestral knowledge existed, which imprinted on us certain aspects of ourselves, like irrational fears, things that can't be explained by personal experience or your own nature. It also includes symbols, themes, and more. Things that arose out of separate cultures but are similar nonetheless. He explained these similarities as common archetypes arising from the collective unconscious. Now, let's consider the implications of if this theory happened to be true. Your personality could be very similar to someone thousands of miles away due to pulling the same inherited traits out of the unconscious. It's not because of who you are or your choices, but DNA and longevity. Under this theory, humanity is less individualistic and more homogeneous. Parts of our personality and who we are isn't because of us, but because of this shared well of consciousness between all of humanity. Our amalgamation of these relics shared between all places, times, and peoples. Now, these inherited items were dubbed as Jungian archetypes, and some of them were viewed by their creator as more important than others. The influence of one of these specifically can be seen in Charles's earlier interactions with Lelouch in C's world. Specifically in episode 15 of R2, where Lelouch meets him at the Sword of Akasha platform for the first time. Charles runs his son through the ringer, asking him what his mask has really gotten him and then reputing his response, saying what it's lost him instead. All his relationships and all those close to him. Saying he wants people to know his true self, yet at the same time he's afraid people will find out who he really is. This relates to a Jungian archetype, those characteristics that are passed on within the proposed collective unconscious, specifically the persona or mask. Essentially, it's the trait of concealing one's true self, an outward face of conformity, and in essence, a form of lying. Although it's about oneself, you could consider it lying to those presented with the mask because it's not a true face. They are believing you to be someone else. This belief is likely why Charles is so harsh on Lelouch in this scenario, knowing that his son, at his very foundation and in his eyes, has lost everything due to the Mask of Zero, figuratively and literally. For Charles, all masks have done is put more obstacles in his way and corrupt more and more people into a nuisance for his plan. For him, people are fighting to keep their lies with more lies. It's a cycle of deceit perpetuated by false truths. And so this is something else he understandably seeks to destroy with the collective unconscious merger, foreshadowing his intentions by telling Lelouch,
"Because you are me and I am you. All else is illusion."
Once they meet again, his son is much less floored when called out on his lies. His response is no longer shock, but simply to say,
But that's pragmatism, isn't it?
Now, pragmatism is a widely interpreted philosophy, but one of its core ideas is that a theory can only be true if it is useful. It places a high value on how much use an idea can bring, rather than traditional morality or things of that like. To sum it up in a few words, most things are simply tools. Now this sounds very Zero, doesn't it? He continues on about the necessity of lies and masks, that they're necessary tools for society, allowing us to meld into places and create nations. We all use masks, but what really is our true face? If we don't know, then this can't be a sin. And if everyone is lying at once as a tool for progress, then it's not wrong, it's just pragmatic. All around him, progress is made by lies and deception. Colin facilitated herself in Season 1 with a fake identity. Suzaku ignores his true self to find repentance and change the system from within. Military tactics here boil down to the same thing. The one who can lie the best and trick the opponent wins. Lelouch's own powers, his Geass, is at its core a lie, forcing people to ignore themselves for his request. Even Charles wasn't entirely truthful, erasing memories and playing Emperor to achieve what he really wanted with a mask of his own. C2 and V2 are equally as shady, making contracts with unclear requirements to get their wish. All of it. The world he knows is built upon lies. They sustain it, they push it forward under whatever banner the perpetrator wishes. In a way, it feels very unsavory knowing how untrue the reality of Code Geass' world is. And for those in a different perspective from Lelouch, it could appear even worse, like it did for Shirley. The rebellion's progress was made on the backs and lives of other people. To make a better world didn't just need personal sacrifice, but murder, oftentimes forcing people fighting for a lie and those uninvolved to death alike. To someone else, this looks less like progress and more like hell on Earth. So it's not entirely out there that Charles would do so much to try and rid the world of these lies, and why this was his ultimate goal. We knew this clearly as it's directly stated, but how he was attempting it always seemed more murky. But the idea of collective unconscious is what Charles attempts to use to cleanse the world of lies. He was trying to meld all of humanity into it with his Ragnarok connection. This explains his response to Lelouch's pragmatic idea that lies are needed, where the Emperor says,
When we realize that lies have no meaning in the endless flow of eternity, those personas will vanish.
it wasn't simply about ridding the world of lies, but combining humanity's consciousness into one, breaking down the barrier between the levels of the unconscious so that every human could share in it as a singular being. Everything and everyone from the beginning of time until now would be inherited by all as one, an absolute unity. This does achieve his goal because you couldn't lie to someone sharing the same consciousness as you. They would be aware of the lie and deception at the very same moment that you conceived it, and thus it has no value and simply just can't happen. It also would prove pointless. If everyone were sharing the same consciousness, there would be no disagreements or conflict to lie over. You'd all have the same opinion on the topics you would have formerly lied about. This also explains how it was going to allow the living to speak to the dead. If they were to become the collective unconscious, then every human who imprinted upon it would be alive once again within it. Everyone throughout all of time would become the same as one being. It's unclear whether this would be a literal one being or if some sense of autonomy would remain. Marianne even says, "There's a chance I could return to my body," meaning either way is a possibility, and the inciting group is unsure as well. This explains what Charles was really up to, but it does something more. It adds another level of depth to why Lelouch is so opposed to the idea and had to stop him. He remarks that doing such a thing will stop the flow of time and actively asks for that not to become the case. But with this new understanding, we can see that it's not simply his time being stopped because he can't lie or that anyone can, but because his father's methods would destroy the future in its entirety by combining past and present. This comes down to Lelouch having a much tighter grip on how humans work than the tyrannical emperor. Lelouch, starting a rebellion and acting as the Enigma of Zero, gave himself a front row seat at how people work and what motivates them. From Mao and his love of C2, to Colin and her mother, to Rollo and Lelouch himself, the common link between every individual fighting both for and against him is just that, the fact that they are an individual. They're all people with unique experiences and lives that led them to fight for a change they want to see or against the change of others they thought was unjust. They all want something unique and for them. In Code Geass, this change is the fate of the world, the perpetuation or fall of Britannia. That's what we see, but it didn't start there. It started with individuals who had ideas for the world and sought to bring those ideas to fruition. Both for good and evil, they all stemmed from disagreement and differing opinions. Without these, there would be no discernible problems for people to try and fix. And if we were all one, there would be no individual wants or needs, meaning there would be no reason to move forward and try to gain something. This is the meaning behind Lelouch's words.
The means to that end requires me to reject something.
To provoke change, there needs to be something to reject, something needing to be changed. And it's clear to see that Charles has much less of a grip on this individualism than Lelouch. This also brings a double layer of relevancy to how Charles and Marianne simply pushed Lelouch and Nunnally out to Japan instead of watching over them. They abandoned them, and this shows how little they understood the individual push for change. They became so wrapped up in their plan that Charles saw even war, even worldwide conflict, as trivial matters not worth his time. And at the end of the day, that comes down to other people quarreling, other people wanting change, being unworthy of his attention. Through his power and through being so caught up in his plan, he failed to recognize what actually provokes change in the first place. And so it's easy to see why he got so wrapped up in this, thinking that it was the perfect solution, because he had closed himself off to what really makes change among real people. And that's why Lelouch's origin is kind of so important, how he's one of the ones who really starts this revolution through individual action. And there really is no bigger difference between him and Charles in that way. In this way, Lelouch is right when he believes the melding of consciousness would grind humanity to a standstill. If everyone is under one banner, then they could never grow or change into something worse or something better. They'd simply stagnate with the lack of individual, existing forever as one who stands for nothing at all because there is nothing to stand for. We can only imagine how strange a future this would be for us, but I'd imagine that feeling would be tenfold for Lelouch. For a man willing to end his own individual life to improve everyone else's, the last thing he'd want to see is all his work, all the death, destruction, and all of it to go to waste to preserve humanity forever in a state of staticity. This idea of the cost of his war going to waste is especially prevalent given his bloody utilitarian revolution. Since the ends justify the means, he has to win for his actions to be right. If you want more on this idea, check out the card on screen now about Lelouch in Season 1. But moving on, his entire being is to exist for change, and with that in mind, it's easy to see why he resists Charles's plan so vehemently, even when it technically could provide a gentle world without war and conflict and unite him and Nunnally forever. In fact, he resists it so heavily, he convinces humanity's consciousness itself to stop it. This is what he uses his Geass on to stop Charles. C's world, the abstract plane they're in, is stated by C2 as the collective unconscious itself. That's why he says it's not just us here, is it, to his father's shock. Lelouch wills the endless collection of humanity itself to resist Charles. He wills human will itself to bend to him. That's how truly powerful this moment is for Lelouch. So I hope I was able to clear up some of Charles's plan and the motivations of both him and his son in these somewhat abstract moments. It's murky, but honestly quite perfect how Lelouch and Charles play off each other, each bringing a deep well of literary influence to an anime that was already near perfect as it stands alone. Now I have more I want to say about Lelouch's final plan and how perfect it is, but that has to wait for another video or this one would be all over the place and an hour long. So keep your eyes peeled for that one coming up if you're subscribed, and if not, consider subscribing to see that video when it comes out or to check out any of the other fantastic videos I have here on the channel. Also consider leaving a like if you like this video or a dislike if not, so I know what to make in the future, and you can leave me a comment letting me know what you want to see, what you don't want to see, anything, what you thought of this video. Leave it down below, because one of the best parts of doing this is getting to see what you all think and talk to you down there as well. Going along the same lines, if you want to reach me directly, talk anime with some other fans, potentially join in some game nights I'm tossing around of having in my Discord, there's a link to that mentioned Discord in the description below where you can do all the things I just mentioned that I almost repeated because I'm terrible at outros. I think that covers everything I have to say though, so keep your eyes peeled for that video, and if you want more, there's some more videos on screen right now for you to check out. But anyway, I'll stop rambling, let you get back on with your day, and just say thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon. I swear I'll do a good outro one day.